In this video, we're going to talk about how plant growth is regulated. So one way that plant growth is regulated is through the use of hormones, right? We have hormones in our bodies that control all sorts of different things, and plants are similar. So the hormones can regulate the growth of plants, and hormones in any organism are chemical compounds produced in one part of an organism that control growth or activity in another part of the organism. So there are five main plant hormones, and so we'll look at each of those five. So the first are the auxins. So auxins are plant hormones that promote cell division and elongation in stems and roots, and they're responsible for something called apical dominance. So what that is the apical meristem. So that's the meristematic cells at the top of the plant is producing auxins, and those auxins are causing the plant to grow up, and they're inhibiting the growth of the lateral buds. So the plant's growing up and not out, and that's called apical dominance. So if you want the plant to grow bigger, bushier, then you can remove the apical meristem, and that takes away the apical dominance and allows the plant to grow out instead of just up. So that's shown in this diagram, right? So when you have an intact apical meristem, the apical bud is releasing auxin and the lateral buds are unable to grow very well. So when you prune off the apical meristem, and I like in this diagram how it calls that apical bud decapitation. So you've chopped off the apical bud, and that allows the plant to become bushier. So I'm going to do something now I don't usually do, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing, because this is something that is stuck in my head since I was in high school, because I had a little song to help me remember this. So here it goes. Cut off the apical, oh goodness, now I have to start again. Cut off the apical meristem and the lateral buds will grow. The lateral buds will grow. The lateral buds will grow. Cut off the apical meristem and the lateral buds will grow, and you'll have a bushy plant. See, isn't that wonderful? Stuck with me for a long time. Okay, let's move on. So, cytokinins. So cytokinins are plant hormones that promote cell division and differentiation. So they promote growth in those lateral buds when the apical meristem is removed. So when the apical meristem is removed, there are no auxins that are stopping them from growing, and the cytokinins are promoting their growth. The cytokinins also stimulate seeds to begin to germinate. Okay, the third plant hormone are the gibberellins. So the gibberellins stimulate plant and fruit growth and stop dormancy in seeds. And they're commonly used on commercial crops. So the gibberellin is applied to the crop to increase fruit size and yield. So the gibberellin's applied, it stimulates the fruit to grow bigger. And this image shows a bunch of grapes without gibberellin and with gibberellin. The next plant hormone is ethylene. And so ethylene is a gas, and so it can move throughout the plant, and its main role is the stimulation of fruit ripening. So this is also used very commonly with commercial fruit and vegetable growth. So sometimes different fruits or tomatoes, for example, are picked when they're not ripe yet because they're not as soft and they can travel better. So then they're shipped when they're not ripe, and then they're treated with ethylene to cause them to ripen once they've reached their destination. Okay, you can also see this effect if you've ever had like ripe bananas, or you put them in a bag with non-ripe fruit, it ripens them up, or vice versa, right? So a ripe fruit would be giving off ethylene and can be used to ripen another fruit. And the last hormone is abscisic acid. And so this one is different because it's acting against all the others. It's inhibiting growth. So it causes the stomata to close so that the rate of photosynthesis goes down, which means the plant can't get as much energy, can't grow as much. It also blocks the action of those other growth promoting hormones. So it's important, for example, if a plant is in non ideal conditions, it doesn't have enough water, for example. So it wants to kind of slow down its growth. And so abscisic acid would be involved in that. Also, trees in the fall, when they're slowing down their growth, preparing for their dormancy over the winter, that would involve abscisic acid. Okay, so those are the hormones. Next, we're going to talk about how plants respond to stimuli. So there are two different ideas here. So, first is the idea that plants have the ability to grow in specific directions in response to an unequal stimulation by the external environment. And so this is called a tropism. So this is a growth response and it's directional. There are also what are called nastic responses, which are movements, but they're not associated with direction. So it's just a movement in response to some kind of stimulus, but not in a specific direction. So we're going to look at nastic responses first. So these are movements, they're reversible, they can be repeated, it doesn't alter the growth of the plant. So some examples are the opening of flower petals during the day. So flower petals open during the day, they close at the night, so it's reversible, it happens the next day, it's repeated. Another example are some sensitive plants, the leaves fold in when they're touched. So you touch the plant and it folds it all in. And so you might have heard of a touch-me-not plant. So that's what they do. They don't like to be touched. You touch them and the leaves fold in. But then once you remove your touch, they'll start to come back. So now the tropisms. So a tropism is a directional growth response to an external stimulus. If the plant grows toward the stimulus, it is a positive tropism. If the plant grows away from the stimulus, it's a negative tropism. So the first type of tropism we're going to look at is phototropism. And you've maybe observed this phenomenon happening, which is the directional growth of a plant in response to light. So that's called phototropism. So in general, stems grow toward the light, which is a positive phototropism, and roots grow away from the light and down into the ground. So that's a negative phototropism. So the hormone auxin is also involved in this process of phototropism. So what happens is there's more auxin produced on the shaded side of the stem. So on the shaded side of the stem, the cells are acted on by auxin and they start to elongate. And because they're bigger than the other cells on the other side, it causes the stem to bend toward the light. And that's shown in that diagram. The next tropism is gravitropism. And as the name suggests, this is the directional growth of a plant in response to gravity. So gravitropism causes roots to grow downwards. So this, in this case, is a positive gravitropism, right? Because gravity acts down. And stems to grow upwards against gravity. So that's a negative gravitropism. And finally, the last tropism is thigmotropism. So this is directional growth of a plant in response to touch. Okay, so it's different than like the nastic response we were talking about with touch. This is when there's actually growth in a certain direction, not just a movement. So for example, vines grow toward and around an object that's touching them, right? So they've grown in a positive way around that object. So that's a positive thigmotropism. And then an example of a negative thigmotropism are the roots. So as they're growing through the soil, they actually, if they come in contact with something like a rock or all sorts of things in the soil, they keep moving, trying to get away from it. So they exhibit a negative thigmotropism. So those are the ways that plant growth can be regulated.